Hello and welcome to another episode of Warrington Wolves Rewired. Today we've got an extra special guest and a very first sir on the show. Welcome to Mr. Speaker and long-time Warrington Wolves supporter, Sir Lindsay Hoyle. Lindsay, how are we doing?
I'm great. I'm absolutely, I've got to say, great to be back up in Lancashire. Came up from London, so nice to be home. And it's good to be on with you. And thanks for inviting me. Yeah, really looking forward to it.
Absolute pleasure. I've been looking forward to this for a long time, Lindsay. How have you been coping with lockdown?
That's worrying. Yes.
How have you been coping with lockdown, Lindsay?
Well, it's not, I suppose it depends which way you look at it. I've had to go to London. So basically, what I've been doing all the way through, I've been in London and back home. So I'm spending during the week in London, sorting things out down there, and then coming back up and, like I say, got back up to Lancashire, which is where I really want to be. Home is in Chorley, always has been, always will be. I've got a great job, got a fantastic job. Love going to London, but I always want to return home. This is reality when I get back here.
And I just want to pick up on that, Lindsay. To start off with, how does a lad from Chorley become such a passionate Warrington Wolves supporter?
Well, that's a very good question. I think, first of all, we've got the greatest game in the world, haven't we, Rugby League? And I think with everything, when you've got the best game, you've got to end up backing somebody. And of course, Doug, my dad, became involved with the club. He was the MP at Warrington. He'd been the MP for many years and then became chairman of the club at Warrington. And like everything, you get involved, don't you? You come into a game, because I was more passionate probably about rugby than he was. And he used to say, oh, well, we'd come to a game with me when he was the MP. And that's how it started. And, I've watched the club develop. I've seen some greats. We go right back, to when Warrington had that very famous pack, the Zoo, when Warrington was, really, one of those really hard clubs, tough teams. Nobody ever wanted to come to Wilderspool. Nobody ever really wanted to face that front row. So I've seen the club develop in many, many ways. So the passion started with Warrington Wolves going back then to the likes of Les Boyd. Those were great names. Kevin Tamati, Bob Jackson, they were really formidable in that front row. It was fantastic. Bob Ettles, with some really great players.
You mentioned going to a game there, Lindsay. Do you recall the first game you attended?
Yeah, and it's interesting because I was going right back to thinking, and Reg Borden was the coach. So we're going back quite a while to when I first started to watch Warrington at Wilderspool. It was from there it really developed. And Warrington was always a kind of nearly club, didn't it? We could win the Lancashire Cup. There was things that Warrington could always win. We were lucky enough that people like Don Davies came along and we got to Wembley. But it was always nearly for Warrington, but never there. I think, when I look back, and it was, like I say, Reg Bowden was there, I'd seen the coaches come and go, I'd seen the team change. I think probably the most disappointing moment for me watching Warrington in those days was that semi-final at Main Road when when he kicked that good drop goal. I've got to say, it was, complete freak of nature that, this phenomenal. And it all came down, and I'm trying to remember when, I think it was Paul Cullen that got penalised for stepping off the mark. Everybody else was stepping off the mark. It was though the referee that day suddenly decided, how do we help Wigan? That's how it felt, when you watch Warrington. It really felt that, once again, the ref's against us. And he gave a penalty, and it changed the game. Because I believe on that day, they'd flown Steve Roach by, Davidson was there. It really was a great, great team. And to lose at Main Road, so close, once again, and it was always Warrington's byline, wasn't it? So near, but no prize. And it was always that, we would never, ever look into the top shelf. We were always just missing out. So the passion developed and the frustration developed, watching Warrington as well, didn't it? Players came, coaches came, things changed. And I've got to say, when Langer came, Justin Langer came, I thought this was a great opportunity for Warrington. This is, the new beginnings. Nico, some fantastic players. Once again, we lost out again to Bradford. We've been unlucky to the teams that we've lost to. And in fairness, we always turned up trumps to beat some teams that we wanted to. And we went through some desperate times as well. So we had some great highlights, some top players that came. Then we went into the doldrums once again. We went through coaches, we went through players. And Warrington almost went down. The fact that Warrington was near the bottom, going out, and we brought the hero of Warrington, has always been a hero to Warrington, was Paul Cullen. When he came back, and people will probably say to, who's the greatest coach? Well, I actually say one of the greatest coaches has got to be Paul Cullen, because he saved the club. He turned the club round. And that's a memory that always says to me, thank goodness Paul Cullen did that. Because if we'd gone out, we've seen what's happened to others, Widnes, they never quite get back. The fact is that Warrington has got a greater history on Wigan on one thing, isn't it? We've never gone out of the top division. And it was about remaining in the top division. That was absolutely the main prize for me. So if you think, difficult times, not all the money that other coaches have had, not all the ability with sign who you want. Paul Cullen saved the club and put the club on the right footing to go forward. And of course you would say, well, if you look at the silverware, it's got to be Tony Smith. But of course we've got a new beginning now, new coach, new team. Let's see how we go. I've got great aspiration for the future. And I think, it's about, we all want that grand final. 3 finals and losing to Wigan, I can't believe it. We've got to do better. We lost to Leeds as well. So, once again, that Nearly club is on grand finals. Wembley, that's Warrington's any time they want. But it's not about losing, isn't it? If I come back to the real frustration of Warrington, how did we lose to Catalan with the team that we had? That will always be the worst memory for me. I've got to say, I just can't get around it. The fact that we had the team, I think confidence, overconfidence when we went to Wembley. Everybody said it's Warrington's day. And like everything, the underdog always comes through. And Warrington's done it in the past, and Catalan did it to us. So what I would say about Warrington is, love the team, love the club, love the players, love everything about it. But they certainly bring the best and the worst out of me.
Lindsay, you're not bad at this speaking gig. You should consider a career in it.
I've given up speaking these days. I'm too busy shouting from the chair at them.
So, Lindsay, reflecting on your own career, let's go back to where it all started. Obviously, you mentioned your passion for Chorley. You were the youngest ever councillor to serve Chorley when elected in 1980 at the age of 22. Were you always destined for a life in politics?
No. What I would say is, politics is a vehicle to make things happen. And if you're passionate about changing things and doing things for the right reason, I think it's really, really good to get involved. And part of what I wanted to do was, I wasn't naturally going to go on the council. It's not something I was expecting. But when I realised that, I live in a village, Adlington, and it's frustration with the council. The council wasn't doing anything for younger people, even though I was young in those days. And it was about the passion to make things happen, to help people. And when I looked round and I looked at the council, and it was like all the same, old men, white-haired, look at me, here's me saying it now, but, they were the older end of politicians, didn't give way to anybody, and just going through the same process. And it was about, how do we make things happen? How do we give a younger voice on that council? And that's what I did. I was asked to stand. They didn't think I could win. That's why I was selected. And what I can prove is that you can win against the odds. You can make that difference. And I had the enthusiasm and a young team around me that I managed to take out the chair of housing, because it was a Conservative council. It's a very Conservative area. It was in those days. And I managed to beat him. He'd come from the village, I came from the village, and I was this young opponent who they never thought could win. And we just worked it to death. And when we won on that night, nobody could believe what we'd managed to achieve. So I came onto the council. You're absolutely right. Well, the real frustration was that when I was on the council, I went through all the process of doing all the different jobs, deputy leader of the council, mayor of Chorley, fantastic 18 years, trying to make a real difference. But the one thing that frustrated me, that when I came off to go to Parliament in 1997, as a 39-year-old, the one thing was, I was still one of the youngest councillors. I said, this cannot be right. And I'm going to change the face of politics in Chorley. So I went and got younger people involved, because the age when I stood, you had to be 21 to stand to go on the council. But the age has changed to 18. So went out, got some young people. And I've got to say, my record has been broken time and time again. I think it's been broken 5 times. And we've had 19-year-olds elected to the council. And that's what I wanted to do. I didn't want to be leaving the same people, nothing wrong with the people on there, but it's about having the right age profile to make the right difference for everybody and making sure people are represented in different ways. So I got these younger people coming on. We've got the council really working well. I work very closely because I'm the MP for Chorley. I sit down with the council and we work together. When everything was going wrong, I said, how do we make things happen? People say to me, we've no cinema, we've nothing for young people. So the first things we've been doing is working so closely that we've changed the face of Chorley as well. Chorley's done really well. Unemployment's around 2%. We've got a very wealthy constituency. We've got the youth zone. Warrington's now getting involved in the youth zone in the same way. I was ahead of that. And I've got to say that made the difference. That what I wanted to do was get a youth zone. They said, Chorley's too small. I said, but we can make it happen. And we did. And we're one of the best youth zones in the country with more members than any other youth zone. And we're competing against cities. And it was about giving young people that voice, that ability to have something that they can be proud of. And we did that. We got the cinema. And then Marks and Spencer's, we'd signed up Marks and Spencer's. Suddenly Marks and Spencer's said, the world's changed. We're not going into town centres. We're pulling out. And it's about wanting that will to make things happen. So I got on the phone, phoned up Archie Norman and said, Archie, I want you to reconsider your position. You're closing Marks in Chorley. He said, Lindsay, he said, I've got to tell you, he said, we can open them. He said, Marks we've got to change. We're in real trouble. We're not opening in town centres. I said, I want you to think about it. I gave him all the reasons why Chorley's a great place to be. You'll do really well. I want you to open it. He said, give me 24 hours. He came back. He said, we're opening. He said, this is the only town centre store that we're opening in the country. But those are the kind of things. You've got the passion, you've got the interest and the drive for the area that you represent. It's not about politics. It's about doing the right things by people. And that's what my passion is. Chorley matters. People in Chorley matter. And it's about doing the right thing and doing and making a better area to live in. And that's what I've always wanted to do.
Brilliant. Sticking with Chorley, Lindsay, I'm fascinated to hear this. You became chairman of Chorley Borough Rugby League Club. Was it the early 90s or mid-90s?
Yes, it was. It was indeed. You're absolutely right. And it was the old Blackpool Borough, ended up at Wigan of all places. And they came to see me. I was on the council. In fact, I was chair of economic development, and I was involved with that. And the club wanted to come. And so I said, well, let's have a look at it and let's see how we can help. And we got a package together. We got them involved with the football club and we moved them in. And they came for a season. That all worked well. And there's different characters on the board. I did go on the board. And they wanted to split the club, which was interesting. They said, we want to go to Trafford, and Trafford Borough came about. And Chorley needed a franchise because they were moving the franchise to Trafford. So we became the actual new club. So everyone thinks, we were the original. We were actually a new club that was elected. And we got a united decision from Rugby League, which is very hard to do, to actually support the establishment of a new club. So Chorley then became that new club, was heavily involved, it was on the board, it was doing different jobs, and we made it happen. And from there we developed, and like everything, things come along. But it was the passion for the club that mattered, and it was about trying to spread Rugby League into this part of Lancashire. And I think we've had great success, and it's been that passion that's come through. And that's why I always laugh about Josh Charnley. He's from Chorley, he lived around the corner, So we've had some great players coming through Chorley Panthers. Chorley Panthers have developed about 5 that's been in the England Great Britain squad, and that's all developed because we brought professional Rugby League took off in Chorley and established all these junior routes coming through. And that's what it was about. It was about development of Rugby League. And, we've seen that come. As I say, we've seen some great players. And if Luke Tompkins, both players, played at Chorley. Now, St. Pat's might get the credit, but they were at Chorley Panthers first. And those youngsters have come through. And that's what I'm very proud of. So it's left great roots, great people involved, people making a real difference. And it is that passion about leaving it. So, yes, Chorley were very good. And you've got great memories, Bob Bettles. We've signed some really good people. And
who was your coach?
We've had a few coaches. We had Bob Bettles for a period, and Bob was with us. Bob was a player. Bob coached us, and we had Stan Gittins. We've had some interesting people along the way that's been involved. And the last coach that I signed was Kevin Tamati.
Right. Wow.
And I then went to Parliament. Kevin was in charge of the club, and of course, Chorley won. They managed to get promoted. They managed to get out of the division, and that was fantastic. They moved to Preston. They became Lancashire Lynx, but it was the club that we established, and they did very well. And Kevin made the difference. And they were a good team. I'd stepped away. I'd become the MP. Part of the deal was, my wife said to me, "There's two things. You're going to be the MP. You give up rugby league, and you also give up the business." So I had to give up my business, because I always promised I'd never do two jobs at once. So I gave up the business and I gave up rugby league. So for a period, not that I'd lost the passion for rugby league, but I actually thought, this is much easier. I can watch on television. I'm not involved. I'm not having to worry about whether players get paid. All those things are behind me now. And then, of course, as I say, Doug, my father, got involved with Warrington. Before I know it, I'm back more watching all the time. I was going to away matches, I was going to all the home games. I thought, this is much easier for me, much harder for him being chairman of the club. But that's where, my real passion again, a real drive for Warrington came through.
You mentioned your dad.
It all came full circle.
You mentioned your dad, Lindsay Duggan. Do you mean I think he's left a long-lasting imprint on Warrington Wolves, and he was very instrumental in the move from Wilderspool to Halliwell Jones, and doing forever in his debt for that. Do you remember that period, Lindsay? The work went on behind the scenes with Doug and the move.
Yeah, very much so. In fact, it was a move that was being put together, and he, obviously as chairman of the club, the one thing is that Wilderspool has got great memories, and everybody remembers the ground that they went to. But like everything, sports develops, and it's about having the right facilities in which to play. And some people say, "Oh no, the passion, the history is in that ground." But actually, if you look at the clubs that Smooth, the Wigans of this world, St Helens, Warrington, are they better for it? I genuinely believe that. And the history comes with you anyhow. And of course, it was about trying to get planning permission. It got so bad that the council were involved, and it was about bringing people together. And of course, some of the MPs weren't as passionate about the move, and it got quite heated, quite bad. But in the end, it was about the drive-through, and Doug, as chairman, wanted to make that happen. He was in discussions with Tesco, and the deal was on that Tesco, part of that deal was that we got a stadium, and it was about taking the town with us. And in the end, the people of Warrington got behind the move. People got involved in a way to go forward. And that's what Doug's benefit was. He could bring people round the table. He pushed and pushed at Tesco. He had more and more meetings with Tesco, whether it was in London or whether it was in Warrington. And in the end, the deal was signed and they got the new stadium. And I think it's a stadium that Warrington can be proud of. And they can be proud of where they are now. And it works, doesn't it? And it's about a modern and new facilities that, as I think, has made Warrington, the players play better in new changing rooms, new pitch to play on. They're proud of where they play. And I think that also helps in the drive forward. And I've got to say, worked very closely. Simon and Doug worked together. Simon Moran was part of that. And without Simon's passion as well, it would never have happened. But the two people at the right time were there to deliver it, with the board that really supported them, with Norman on there as well. And they gelled, and they gelled so much. And I'll never forget. And I think, it was that great passion about playing Huddersfield where Doug led the team out, and I think, it's a memory that he'll never forget, that he walked his team out. They'd been through, I think, 5 coaches. They'd moved grounds. You know, he'd even had the phone calls on a Sunday night that the player had been arrested and witnessed, you know, and he'd had all this. And finally, they got to a cup final and they lifted that cup at Wembley. He came back and he said to me on the Sunday, I don't know what I'm going to do. He said, I'm going to the town hall. The coach went round the town with all the players on. They got to the town hall. They were on the steps. The crowd were there because it had been a long time since we'd had a trophy like this coming to Warrington. He spoke in front of all those people he'd represented for all those years. You know, so his passion was there. And he said on the Monday, that's it. He said, I've done what I need to do. He said he went to the board meeting on the Monday. He walked in. Everybody was so jubilant. What's next? And he said, well, the one thing is, he said, I'm stepping down as chairman. I've done my term. It's now for somebody else to take over. And the club was so generous when they made him the president. So I've got to say, I believe he's rewarded the club, but the club's rewarded him by making him president of the club. So I think his passion continues. He's not got the ability to, you know, he's still got the drive, but it's about the legs don't move as well as they used to, you know. So, he's still there. But of course, my passion carries on for the rugby and in particular rugby league as well. So as passionate as I am for the club, it is the passion for rugby league, and I try and drive that in Parliament, creating the meetings that take place, getting involved, bringing in the Secretary of State to give support to rugby league. I thought that was so important to me. We've had those meetings, and in a sense, I've got a new ability to help all the clubs with the position I've got as Speaker. So it's about making sure that my passion for rugby league is ability to deliver that. I'm still on the rugby league group in Parliament, but at least I can call in the ministers to have discussions if there's problems for rugby. I'm always there to support our great game.
Superb. And I was going to touch on that, the 2009 Challenge Cup final. We went back-to-back in 2010, also victorious, raising the Challenge Cup trophy once again. Who did you like watching, Lindsay, through this period? Who's your favourite players that used to look forward to going watching?
I think, and that's what I said. There is real passion in players, you know. And I do come back round, and I was thinking about it last night, and I thought we have so many great players that we've had, and I wanted, you know, and I was thinking about those great highlights of the players that we had, and I go back to where we started, and I think, in fairness, that when I look at the players early doors. And there were so many of the great players. It was that Warrington pack that dominated. And, you know, when I think about the great players that we've had, you know, I think Mike Gregory, the memory of Mike Gregory and the passion, the fact, not only was he a great player at Warrington, but when he went to Australia and they won that game, I will never ever forget it. Mike Gregory scoring that try, you know, I think he needed a new pair of lungs afterwards. But it was amazing. And the passion to say, he's a Warrington player. You know, the fact was that he stuck with Warrington when we'd seen the likes of great players like Andy Gregory. They'd all been scooped up, that Wigan's checkbook was out there, signed the players. Mike Gregory, Wigan player, Wigan born, came to play and stood with Warrington all the way through. So I think, you know, that passion of him scoring that try, Mike Nicholas running on the pitch, I'll never forget. I'm watching television, we're looking at Australia, who stands out but Mike Nicholas, you know, hugging Mike Gregory, you know, I'll never forget that. And I think those, you know, I think I start with him, the likes, you know, Jonathan Davis, he was something special. You know, he came from rugby union, and he's a man that still stands up for our game as well. You know, so it was the passion, the fact that he'd been driven out of Wales, that he came to rugby league. I was so pleased for him. You know, I think one of the biggest stars to come out of rugby union for Warrington was Alan Bateman. He was class. The fact that he showed his class at Warrington, was then able to go to South Africa and play for the Lions. You know, I'm not a great fan of rugby union, but the fact is that he could transfer between the two, showed his real ability. You know, and so in that sense, he made a real difference and was real passion. So I think, you know, Lee Breers, who could forget Lee Breers with how many games he played for Warrington? He obviously didn't fit in at St Helens, young, probably a bit cheeky, a bit cocky, which you'd expect. Lee's never changed, but he came to Warrington and he came all the way through. So, you know, I was really pleased to be able to see somebody like Lee Breers develop and still be with the club. And when we wanted that real steel coming in, when we wanted to make the difference, Adrian Morley. You know, the fact that Adrian came in and he made that real difference. But you know, when the game was tough, when it was brutal, you know, like I said, Les Boyd, Kevin Tamati, Bob Jackson, Paul Bishop, you know, they were all there. A different era, so I've seen different people in different styles, and as I said, watching Paul Cullen, who stood with the club, so we've had some people that stand with us all the way through, and I think that's what's made a difference. And we're now with the modern game. You know, when I say we've had the pleasure of seeing Justin Langer, you know, we've now got a new crop of Australians in there, and there are so many players that I'm in awe of that's played at Warrington that's made a real difference. You know, Matt King, you know, he came over, he played with us and went back to the NRL and was a superstar. So, you know, we've seen some real greats. I always find it hard to say one player. I think if I've got to say, for loyalty and passion to the club, that lies with Paul Cullen and Mike Gregory, you know, and Lee Briers. I think they've been with us all the way through, thick and thin, and that's what matters to a club.
We spoke about the glory days and the great plays and the great times that we've had. However, Lindsay, on the other side, what would you say has been the lowest point as a Warrington fan?
I think the lowest, as I said, the lowest point to me has always got to be when it looked like that we were going to go out. I think, you know, the fact that we were at the bottom of the division, I think that was the low point all the way around. Money was tight, it was difficult times, and we needed something to lift us. And I think I always come back to Paul Cullen coming back as the coach. We can say Tony Smith, without doubt, we look at the silverware. He cropped, you know, he collected that silverware and he did a great job for the club. Absolutely fantastic what he did. But actually, the person I really, you know, put a lot of credit to was Paul Cullen. Came in, he was up at Whitehaven. He was brought back to save the club, and I genuinely believe he saved the club. He made players play again. He put passion back into the club, and he began to make sure there was a route and a road forward for Warrington. So, you know, it was about that, and nobody can ever take that away. And Paul's passion's still there for Warrington to this day. So I've got to say, you know, I've got to say that the low point, as I say, I can pick the game. The low point when I thought we were, you know, when we snatched away for us was Main Road by Joe Lydon. But actually, when I look at the low point for the club on a continuous basis, when we're near the bottom, and Paul Cullen picked us up and gave us a way forward. And I think it was that way forward. And you've got to say, you know, without Simon Moran's passion, it would never have happened. You know, it is about that. And you know, people that said to Warrington's finished, they shouldn't be around. We proved that Warrington has to be around. And we're the club now that everybody looks to. And it's like yourself, Carl, it's that professionalism we've got. People look at Warrington and say, actually, that's the club I want to copy, where previously would never have looked at us. And it was about that long, slow build-up to a club that's top of its game. The fact is, we've now got to get the results in. We've got to make sure that we start winning again. The one thing that will always hold us back is we've still not won that grand final. To win that, I think everybody will always say, we're still a nearly club. We've got to prove everybody wrong. And if we can do that. So, as you said, the question was, what was the low point? The low point was definitely when we were at the bottom of the division. And the fact that we brought Paul Cullen back, that's where I think we began to really change.
I mentioned in 2010 we went back-to-back Challenge Cup winners. Well, this was also the year he was elected Deputy Speaker and Chairman of Ways and Means. Lindsay, what does the Chairman of Ways and Means do?
Well, it's the second oldest title in Parliament because you had the Speaker. And the problem for the Speaker was the King's man. And the King was there. So he actually, the Speaker is the representative of the King. And what really happened, and we're going back in history, the Parliament said, hang on a minute, every time we raise the taxes, the King gets wealthier. Where is this money going? Where is taxation going? And the Speaker used to retire with a barrow used to take all his money as well. So in fairness to Parliament, Parliament said we have to have our own man because, of course, we didn't have women in Parliament. And they said we want our own man. So they created the title of Chairman of Ways and Means. And basically, the Chairman of Ways and Means was about finance. It's the way and the means of taxation. It's how you collect and how you spend the taxation. So they didn't trust the Speaker, so they created the Chairman of Ways and Means. And that's why, to this day, I can no longer do the budget. It's the new Chairman of Ways and Means that takes over. And I was the one that always did the biggest day in Parliament, the biggest gig as Chairman of Ways and Means is Budget Day. So only the chair can actually be the person who sits in the chair on Budget Day. So I've overseen some great budgets. I've watched it come and go, and some of the videos there of MPs trying it on a bit because Budget Day gets them all excited. They want to shout down the Chancellor, or they want to shout down the Leader of the Opposition. So it's a challenging day, and I've got to say, I've had some fantastic days on that, and interesting times with MPs when they get a bit too excited. So that's what the Chairman of Ways and Means is about. It's about the means and taxation, and it's actually overseeing the finance.
Super. Lindsay, whilst you were Deputy Speaker and Chairman of Ways and Means, predecessor John Bercow refused Donald Trump the opportunity to deliver a speech in Parliament. What was your take on all that?
Well, I'll be upfront. I'm not a fan of Donald Trump. Far from it. I think politics it was an all-time low for politics in the world when we were seeing what's happened, and I think it's up to the American public to actually they've got to choose a new president, and I hope we do have change in American politics because it does dictate world politics as well. But my view is I don't think it's for a speaker to say no, you can't come and speak to Parliament. I think it was for the House to decide. My view is it was a retrograde step, whatever I might think. I don't agree with Trump's politics, never will. He's not my cup of tea. But I think the House should have decided. What we do know is it's not just John Bercow's decision, because actually Westminster Hall, and that's the big hall where Obama has spoken, where the Pope has spoken. I've had the privilege of meeting both of those greats. When you do bring in politicians, I think it is a decision that's got to be taken by both the House of Lords and House of Commons. And I think that the House of Commons should have decided that they didn't want Trump to speak, not one person. Whatever we might think, I will never, as I say, agree with his politics. We've had other speakers who I don't agree with, but we've allowed them to speak. What I say is that it will be better if politicians are elected. We've got to respect that. We've got to work with them even if we don't agree with them, and we've got to change the way that they bring their politics around. I'm not a fan of China, but we still had the Premier of China come and speak. Just because I don't like them is not something that it shouldn't be my decision. We should listen to what we've got to say. We should try and change the way and the opinions that they bring upon us. World statesmen, whether we like them or not, we should be working with them and try and get a better world. And hopefully the American public will make a difference. And I'd like to see the next president of America come into Parliament. Like I say, I've had the privilege of meeting Obama. President Obama came to Parliament.
What was Obama like?
Let me go back to one before him. I've got to say Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton is probably the first president I've got to meet. Bill Clinton could light up a room. Without doubt, whatever they might say, the passion of Tony Blair, whether you liked him or not, people were in awe if Tony Blair walked in a room. If you double that by Bill Clinton, it was like illuminated. He switched all the lights on when he walked in. He'd such passion, such ability. I watched him stand up and speak for 3/4 of an hour without a note in front of him. And he delivered it in such a way you were like, oh my word, this guy is something special. And special people don't come along that easily. You never expect to meet another president that can do that. And I've got to say, President Obama came along and he was there. He walked in and he was something different. He was something new, and America needed something new. They were on a move. They were on change. And I thought here we are, a black president. Who would ever have thought that America would have a black president? And it was something special. It was something unique. So to meet him, was absolutely something different. And he was so passionate in his speech. He wanted to deliver a new world. He wanted to change the world for the better. And I think it was that building of great American presidents. And that's what he was. He was a new great, a breakthrough. He had such passion and he wanted to change things. And what we will remember him about, here he was. People say, well, Afghanistan, you name it. He was a person that actually did something different in America. They didn't have a health service, and he brought in the health service that we take for granted in the UK. He made real differences. He wanted to put Cuba, this sore around America, this anti-Cuba, we are not going to listen. And he brought links together and it re-establishing those links that mattered. So I think he was a great president. He was a great person to meet. And when he came into Parliament, it was about what does he bring? And he came in. And in the same way as I said, and that's why I wanted to use Bill Clinton, you felt in awe when you were meeting somebody like President Obama. So that's where it really mattered. What was interesting was I was meeting her and we're having a chat. I said, "Oh, you ought to come to Chorley next time because you come to the UK." It light through him a bit. Who's this guy asking me to come to Chorley? So it was about that, saying, "Oh well, you've done London, but you haven't done Chorley yet." So it was about getting that Chorley message across it. And what they said to me was, "Look, President Obama's just going to have a walk around. Can you do us a favour?" I said, "What's that?" They said, "Would you show Tom Hanks round Parliament?" Because he was with him. So I'm like, "Yeah, that's fine." And Kath, my wife's with him, said, "Oh, you don't need to worry. I'll show Tom Hanks round, So we did. And it's about meeting greats like that. And it was about showing Tom round as well and showing him. And what's interesting, Americans, you forget they've no real history. So they come into a building that's almost 1,000 years old. In Westminster Hall, he's speaking on the steps. The fact that we've had great history there. Charles II was held, his trial was held there. Thomas More, these great people of history has all happened. Henry VIII, this was his favourite palace. This was the palace he lived in. And for the Americans to have 1,000 years of history before them, we can look at everything that's happened. And he came in, I showed him round and we took him into the chamber. And he wanted to stand at the dispatch box. This American actor suddenly turned into Prime Minister, and he was playing the Prime Minister, and he nobody's filming him. He just wanted to be that politician at that dispatch box, and showing his ability to be a British parliamentarian. He couldn't believe it. He wanted to be Churchill. He wanted to be at the same dispatch box that Churchill had stood at. So it's great, and those are the great days. So yes, fantastic to meet President Obama. He was electrifying, but to take Tom Hanks round is something different, I've got to tell you.
Wow. If Obama does come to Chorley, make sure he comes off the M6 early and visits the Halliwell-Jones Stadium.
Absolutely, and that's what we've got to do. It is interesting, and people who want to talk, and I always want to talk about Rugby League. I got when I was invited to the Australian High Commission, and the High Commissioner said to me, he said, "Lindsay," he said, "we understand you're interested in Rugby League." I said, "I'm High Commissioner." He said, "Well, so am I." He said, "I'm a great passion." I said, "Well, you've got to come to Warrington." I said, "You've got to come to the stadium. You've got to come and actually, come and have a look round what we're offering in the north. It's all right, you're stuck in London. We've got to get you people out to London. There's another world in the north, and part of that is actually Warrington Rugby League Club." So he was laughing and said, "I really want to come. I really want to come and see and meet some of the players." I said, "You must do that." And wherever I can, always try and sell the game. No. Nick Robinson, he's there. He's a politician, and he said to me, "Lindsay," he said, "I was brought up in Macclesfield." He said, "I did my training at Granada." He said, "And I've been with the BBC." He said, "Actually," he said, "I've never watched a game of rugby league." He said, "And my club is Warrington." He said, "Even though I've not watched them," he said, "on that basis, you sold it so well to me." And he wants to do a programme on rugby league when we get beyond COVID, we get beyond that. He wants to come and have a chat to the club, chat to yourself, chat about why does rugby league matter? Why is there such passion in the north? And that story is going to be told at some point. and that's what it's about.
Brilliant. At the start of the show, Lindsay, I mentioned you're a Sir, knighted in 2018 for political and parliamentary services. Tell us about that. How did it come about? What was you surprised?
Well, it's great, isn't it? You know, I've got to say, things are that you go along in life. I think the biggest thing was that, yes, it was offered to me to services, and you know, I've been chairman of Ways and Means, and every chairman of Ways and Means gets a knighthood. So was I shocked in the sense that, of course, I was shocked that here's this lad from Chorley, whoever had thought I would get knighted, who'd ever thought I would make deputy speaker. So, you know, it's great. It's a great privilege to be offered that. And you know, I've got to say, it's fantastic. And it was a day to remember. And unfortunately, in life, that I was meant to be knighted. And you'll not believe it, I must be the only person that turns the Queen down. The day before, John Bercow says, I've got to go to the funeral of a former speaker. You have to take over Prime Minister's questions. Now, here I am. I'm going to have to stand up the royal family in order to do Prime Minister's questions. And I pulled out the day before. And that's not normally done. There was very good reason to that, because I am the deputy speaker at that time. Yes, there are others, but they are down the pecking order in that sense, and the House always works on pecking order. So the first time ever in 9 years, I've got a chance to actually do Prime Minister's questions. And I'm like, I should be being knighted today. I should be going up to Buckingham Palace. What do I do? Well, unfortunately, I had to give back word to the palace. In fairness to them, they were very understanding that the speaker isn't going to be there. And I did Prime Minister's questions the first time ever. I thought, who knows, I may never get another chance of this. And the royal family, in fairness, and the palace were very accommodating and said, don't worry, we will provide a new date. It could be a few months. I said, well, so be it. And that's why it was delayed from something that should have happened. I think it was around the May time. Suddenly was then put back to later in the year. So, you know, these things happen. So I had the ability to be able to show that I could do Prime Minister's questions. I stood in for John Bercow. We got through the day. We got through it very quickly. I got through 30 questions, and I did it in about 35 minutes. And suddenly the world was all about me doing PMQs, what a difference it makes, and how could I do it in such a quick time. And we did. So, you know, I was lucky that it came through, and I got through it very easily and very smoothly. And I did go out to pick up my knighthood. So the palace rearranged it, and I've got to say Princess Anne was the one that knighted me on that day. And it was a fantastic day. It was good for the family. It was good for all of us. You know, it's interesting and very upsetting, because I did lose my daughter and she wasn't able to come. My other daughter was there, Kath, and my dad. So we turned up, and my son-in-law. And, you know, it was a very special moment for us all. To go to the palace, to be knighted.
Does it come with obscure perks, like you're allowed to walk your sheep through London without getting arrested? Is there any kind of perks that come to be knighted? You have a seat in St Paul's or whatever, you know. So there are certain things that come with it. To be honest, I've never even had time to really research it. So it's very nice. I've got to say, I think it was better for Kath because she became you know, a lady. She gets the title. I try not to use my title. And in fairness to Kath, and she deserves it, because she has a lot to put up with me as well. You know, I'm never there. So from that point of view, that, you know, I may be a knight, but it's more about Kath earned it more by becoming Lady Kath, you know. So when I would say Lady Hoyle, and in Parliament they call her Lady H, you know. So from that point of view, it was really nice. I try to play it down. Maybe I shouldn't, but I do. I don't use it. It's the, you know, it's a great reward for the service I've had. I think, you know, when I became speaker was, you know, something fantastic. The other thing is that I think if I was to pick something, I think becoming a Privy Councillor, I think was probably the biggest thing to me. That, you know, I have this title of Right Honourable Gentleman, and to become a Right Honourable. Doug's done many things and he got everything. He never actually became a Privy Councillor. And I've got to say, being a Privy Councillor was something different. You know, I was sworn into the Queen's
Privy Council. And what does that mean? That all bills and legislation go through the House. They have to be signed off by the Queen. And 4 Privy Councillors are invited to make sure they explain to the Queen why before she signs them off. So you go along. So that in itself is very special, being one of the Queen's Privy Councillors. And tragically, if something happens and the Queen dies, all the Privy Councillors are brought together to pick the next monarch. Wow. So there is a job in that as well. So, hopefully that phone call won't come. But every year, the palace check with us. What is your mobile number? How can we contact you? You have to be available within 24 hours to attend this meeting to pick the next monarch. So, that in itself, becoming a Privy Councillor was special. There's not as many of us as what we might think, and that's there. And it allows you to have briefings as well from government in a private way.
You mentioned about becoming elected Speaker in 2019. How would you sum up that role, Lindsay?
Well, I think who'd have ever thought that somewhere from Chorley can become one of the great positions in the country, and it is. It's without doubt, it's one of the top positions. And I never thought it could happen. I'm the first Lancastrian for it to have happened too. And to get there, I'm the 158th Speaker. We go back from medieval times when it first all started, back to the 1300s. And as I say, I'm the 158th Speaker, and what a privilege it is. And it's a great privilege. I never thought it would happen. And it was one of the great positions of state within this country. It's held in such high esteem. And it was about, how do I take over? How do I do something different? And it is about that, isn't it? That you've got a Speaker Burkle. We've all bring something different. It's Speaker Hoyle's turn now. And it's about style. It's about the way that we do it. And what I would say is, we all have a different style. And my style will be judged at the end in the same way that every other speaker previously has been judged. It's a fantastic position to hold, but it is a great challenge. This is about getting, I've got to hold the House of Commons. I've got to hold the business of the House of Commons, but it's much deeper than that. So people may see me 2 or 3 hours a day in the chair, chairing the debates, but it's about the decisions behind the scenes as well. What comes with that is a lot of responsibility. I have 3,000 staff to be able to look after. The fact I've got to try and ensure that MPs are safe because I look after the security as well. I have different meetings all the time. The Prime Minister bounces into my office after Prime Minister's questions last week. In he comes and in walks Boris. I'm thinking, oh my word, you sit there, Boris. I don't want you too close. But, with COVID around. So, we had a conversation. He's frustrated. He wants to see more MPs in Parliament. And, we had a conversation about, well, unfortunately, Prime Minister, I am not going to allow more MPs in. We're restricted where we are. If Public Health England say to me it's safe to do so, then I will begin to lift the restrictions on the number of MPs I'm allowing in. I said, and your frustration, you've got to get legislation through. I'm not going to block your legislation. That's not my job to block. What I've got to do is make sure that we have enough committees that are operational and that we can get the legislation through committees. And I will make sure that there are clerks are available, that we have, and that ability to make sure the rooms are there. And that I will guarantee I will make happen for you. But as far as numbers go, when Public Health England say to me that we no longer have a 2-metre restriction, I will lift that restriction for you. But in the meantime, it's business in a way that is not the usual way we do it, but we will carry on. So I've seen the Prime Minister come in. I've now seen a new leader of the opposition coming in, and a new format of where people have been zooming the questions in. And we dropped all that to go back to now, but I think we're changing again to try and make sure that people are safe.
How did the Prime Minister take it? Did he leave his tail between his legs?
Yeah, he's, Lindsay, no, Mr. Speaker, don't worry. He's all like bluster and everything, and like everything, I take everybody at face value. I try to get the best out of everybody. And, you know, it's about having working relationships. So on the one hand, I might be seeing Keir Starmer. On the other, it could be the Prime Minister who's coming into my office. I see all the different people. I always try to get the best out of those relationships. And it's about having working relationships, you know. So we have, what you know, from Boris leaving and it's all Etonians, you know. And I've got to say, Jacob Rees-Mogg, you know, he's all Etonian, but we have a working relationship. He's leader of the House. He wants to lead the way. You know, he is in control of the order paper, but I'm in control of the House. And it's about making the best of those working relationships, you know, and working with Keir Starmer. I will sit down with everybody. It doesn't matter what political party they are, you know, I will sit down, and whether it's the Green Party, we're just having one member of Parliament, they all matter to me. Plaid Cymru come in, you know, and the SNP come in. And they're ringing me and they're speaking to me all the time. And it's about building up working relationships, because in the end, they have been elected as MPs and I've got to look after them in the same way. So whether you represent a member of Parliament for one party or whether it's the leader of the Conservatives and the Prime Minister of this country, they all need a voice. It's looking after them, working with them and trying to make the House a different place. You know, whatever we might think, the House had a very bad reputation. I want to change that reputation. I want to make it a better place to work. I want to make sure that the people who work in Parliament feel as valued as the MPs as well. And that's what I've got to do, is valuing everybody, looking after everybody, making that difference. And it'll be nice to get beyond COVID, to get the House back to where it should be, because I do miss the atmosphere. I miss the electric, you know, of what the tension of everything that's going on and the passion in speeches isn't there. But when it does come back, it'll be great. And it'll be nice to have, you know, when we have visiting heads of state coming in, people coming into Parliament, it'll be good to get back to the way that we were. And hopefully we will be back at some point, and it's not too far away. That, you know, the tragedy that we're having, you know, COVID's made a real difference to Parliament, but it's made a real difference to this country as well. You know, everybody knows somebody who has died, and that's not a good place to be. We've got to make sure that we'll learn a lot from this and that we are better prepared for the future, and that we'll make sure it's a great future beyond where we are now.
So you're managing all these personalities, Lindsay, and it seems to me the role is akin to a Super League referee.
It is a referee, isn't it? That's what I am. You're absolutely right. The Super League referee, you know, 1 minute he's loved, 1 minute he's hated. Unfortunately, I think that goes with the territory for me as well. So when I make a decision, I can make some happy, but I will always make some unhappy. So you're absolutely right. But what I want to be as that referee, we don't want to be talking about the referee. And I always say, if they're talking about me, that means that Parliament's not doing the right thing. And I want to try and keep out of the limelight as much as possible. It's very hard, but it is about refereeing the game. I want them to talk about the legislation, not talking about the decision that I have made. So I'm trying not to make as many decisions that upset people. It's about making the right decision and letting them get on with it. You know, legislation matters. I don't want them to talk about me about it.
So Lindsay, the question is then, who would be easier keeping in check? A group of rugby players or a group of MPs?
Trying to keep rugby players happy has always been difficult. You know, in negotiating contracts has always been tough. When I was chairman at the club, I've got to say, Carl Briscoe was a great player. And I've got to say, you've got Sean at the club. Yeah. Carl, you know, got on well. But, oh my word, could he negotiate and go on about a contract? Until we sorted out how many free boot laces he got in a year, I could never get that contract to bed. So what I would say is, you know, I've had a lot of difficult times, you know, negotiating contracts. I've got to say, both are difficult, but hopefully I've always had the ability to get through it. And that's what I've got to do with these. But I've got to say, you've got a lot of MPs in there who have certainly got egos.
You mentioned Boris there, Lindsay. Does he have a Super League club? Who does he support? Surely you've converted him.
Well, the trouble is with Boris, I think he's still playing a game called The Wall, isn't he, at Eton? What I would say is, and we saw how we can knock kids over when he picks up a rugby ball in Japan. We need to get him. I've got to tell you, you know, when I get the sports minister, Secretary of State, I always say to him, I think I'll come back to Boris another day. And maybe we ought to get into Wembley to a Challenge Cup final. And he will come, in fairness to him. What I would say is it's about getting to the Secretary of State, making sure they are aware of how important rugby league is. And it's about sitting them down and saying, right, you do realise there are two types of rugby. You've got rugby union, but then you've got the real rugby, which is rugby league. And what I've got to say is, don't fall into the trap. Rugby union's important. Lots of people watch it. I like all types of rugby. But there is one game that matters most. And that's about making sure they understand the difference between rugby league and rugby union and making sure that they start having the passion. You know, I was talking to Tracy Crouch, and Tracy's an ex-sports minister. Unfortunately, she's a Leeds Rhino fan. So I've got to say, you know, I've got to correct her. I was speaking to her, I was driving up last night. Look, Tracy, don't forget, it's Warrington that matters. You're no longer the sports minister, but your passion for rugby league's still there, and it is. And it's always about having that right passion, even if it's not the right club they support.
As Alistair Campbell, a friend of the club, informs me that he actually converted Tony Blair to become a Warrington Wolves supporter. Are you aware of that?
Well, you know, I'm aware that Tony, you know, is passionate in many ways, and we've got to make sure that now he's becoming back in vogue again, we can have him at the club. You know, people are appreciating, you know, the values that he had and that he was a prime minister that could win elections. You know, I've always got a soft spot for Tony and what he did. In fairness, I wouldn't have been an MP without Tony Blair.
We touched on Boris, but I want to touch on another Boris you have in your life, Lindsay. Your collection of pets. Names. So tell us, Lindsay, what pets do you have?
Well, of course, we've got Boris the parrot that's quite famous, is this parrot. Because he goes on the train as well, he gets in the cat basket. So sometimes I'll take him on the train with me. And Boris is, you know, he's got ruffled feathers, so they need smoothing a bit. He repeats himself a lot. And he, you know, he was named when Boris was actually the Mayor of London. You know, so he's been around and he's quite a character. And he shouts a lot, you know. From 1 minute he'll be saying, a glass of bubbles, would you like a drink? Or to order, lock the doors. So he's got all the parliamentary language that goes with him. So he is quite well known and people want to meet him and they come out of his way. You know, he does a double act with the cat as well because the cat goes down to London regularly. Then we've got this tortoise, a 3-stone tortoise. She's quite a big girl. And she's called Maggie. And people say, well, why do you call her Maggie? I said, well, this tortoise isn't for turning. And it's got a very hard shell. So that's how they get the names. And tragically, we lost Gordon, the Rottweiler. We had to have him put down. His heart was going about 6 weeks ago. But he was named after Gordon Brown. And they said, well, why was he Gordon Brown? I said, well, he was a very passionate dog, but he used to have a clunking paw. And they used to talk about Gordon Brown having this clunking fist that used to bang the table. This dog used to slam you on the leg. You know, a 9-stone Rottweiler banging you on the leg, you always knew he was around. You know, so he was there as well. And we've got Betty. We've still got her. She's at Patterdale. She's really feisty. And, of course, Betty Boothroyd, the former speaker, was very feisty as well. And she held court. And this dog, you know she's there. She may be small, but she's certainly got the passion that goes with it.
Brilliant. Lindsay, you may recall Charlotte Nichols, the MP of Warrington North, raced against the wire flyer earlier this year.
Yes. I do remember. Yes, I do recall.
Are there any other politicians who you think could give the wire flyer a race for his money?
Oh, I'm sure that there are a few politicians around that would give a real challenge, but the Warrington Fly, you know, it's how much gap there is, isn't it? You know, he certainly can run a bit. I've watched him, you know, take these challenges on. You know, and I'm sure there's one or two that I could think of that may want to give him a run for his money.
Brilliant. So, what's your thoughts on our current team, Lindsay?
I think it's a good squad. I think the new signing is going to make a difference. 2 years out of the game, you know, Greg Inglis is. Look, we're all in awe of his name, the passion and the way that he played. He's wherever he's been, he's made a difference to the club. Now, I want to see him play for Warrington. I'll be so proud to watch him pull his shirt on, and when he pulls that shirt on, that'll show. I'll be in awe of seeing this great player, this great once again. But I never ever thought that he will be playing for Warrington. So I think it's fantastic. I've got to say we've got some great players at the moment. I think we've got a great squad, and of course, with Josh Charlie coming from Charlie, he's always going to be a favourite, isn't he? Every time he scores another try, let's get that out on Twitter. Let's let the world know that Charlie once again has scored a try. I want him to get a hat trick next week, and that's what I'm really looking forward to. But I think it is a great team. I think we've got some real power in there. I think it gives us a new dimension. I'm not quite sure where he's going to play, because Stephen Ratchford, I think he's one of Warrington's all-time greats in a sense. I really do think personally, and we all want to be amateur coaches, that I think Stephen's, when he started the season, back as a half-back, I think he puts real passion in there. I think it was blending rather well. He'll always do a job wherever he plays for you. And the one thing is that I think the only position I've not really seen Stephen play is prop, because we've certainly moved him around in every other position. He's great at full-back, but I don't know whether he's going to go back to half-backs. I think he's one of Warrington's underrated stars. I think, whatever it is, he will always give you 100%. And that's the one thing that you want out of a player. Stephen Ratchford always gives us that. I think he's great players. I think with many great players at the club, that when we look, his kids go to school with my grandchildren, so he's there, isn't he? We've got these great players, and it's just about when it gels. I want it to really gel when we play Wigan, because there's no better time than actually when Warrington turn up. We can beat Wigan. We can hold our heads high. We owe them a few, and I think this is the team that can do it. So I've got to say, I think in every position we're well covered, because I always think we get stretched that we've never had the squad to back it up. I believe we have got a much bigger squad this time, and I think that squad will give us much more passion to be able to play. The fact if somebody gets injured, we know we've got cover as well. Hopefully, we won't have the injuries. But I think the Australians we've got at the club are fantastic. I think they're going to come together. I think that'll gel well, and hopefully, I've got to say that this is the year. If we do get the season going, where actually I think we can win the grand final, and I think we can go to Wembley again. If everything being equal, we get the squad playing. That's a squad that's got enough ability. It's got the pack. It's got the size to do it. We've got the half-backs that can do it. So there is no reason why this can't be the team that goes all the way and that we can lift the silverware once again. And I'm really pleased that we've got this great signing now in Greg English. I was so excited when I heard it. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, I'm going to phone up my mate Tony, who's the speaker in Australia, just to say to him, just to let you know, guess who we've signed? Because there's real passion. The speaker in Queensland, he's a big Brisbane fan. He's like, when I was out there, 18 months ago with him, and he wanted to show me the statue to Alfie Langer, wanted to talk about it. He gave me a Broncos top, So I'm like, we're top of our game. We're ready for the Broncos. I'm waiting for you to come over. So, I love talking to the Australian politicians. I really give it to them. And I can give it even more now. We're a top side, and we're a side that can take on the Australians as well.
Wow, brilliant. Lindsay, thank you so much for that.
No problem.
Great insight into your incredible career. And also I want to say a big thank you from everyone involved in Rugby League within the UK, because I know how much you're passionate about the sport, passionate about Warrington. It's come through in spades, in buckets today. And I know that you're always beating the drum and championing the sport of Rugby League down in Westminster. Superb, Lindsay. Thank you very much.
I'm looking forward to putting a reception on when Warrington are back in London. Look after yourself. All the best. Thanks for having me. Cheers, Carl. Keep up the great work.